Today, I would like to talk about a problem and a solution, a humanitarian crisis and a humanitarian approach. What is the problem? The problem is food insecurity and hunger across our great country. What is the solution? Spread the love. Fantastic, I don't need a clicker. So let me briefly, in a few seconds, literally tell you what Spread the Love is about, and then get on with some stories for you. So Spread the Love today, 10 years later, is a national humanitarian movement. We're a nonprofit organization, and what we do is we get franchise Spread the Love chapters in individual and respective high schools, post-secondary institutions, nonprofits, businesses, to recruit volunteers, recruit funds, hold sandwich making events, and then provide these to hungry Canadians. Thank you. So through this approach, with very little effort, we provided over 100,000 meals to hungry Canadians. Over 70 schools and institutions were involved and are involved. And we have provided these meals to 15 independent frontline organizations, such as soup kitchens, to then deliver to those struggling day to day. A sort of TEDx model, you could imagine. We do give a very strong brand and some guidelines to the youth and individuals running these Spread the Love chapters, and they go on and they use their vision and their leadership to decide how far they would like to go. I think maybe we'll switch to the magical touch. I was given a clicker, and I think, just give me a couple seconds here. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. So let's talk about 3 experiences that led me to doing what I did, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how Spread the Love grew from a very simple idea to a national movement. I would like to talk about inclination, frustration, and then balance that with some inspiration. If you take a moment and think yourselves right now, we're all inclined to something that we care about. We have something, I like to use the word selfish, something that we selfishly care about, and that's okay. Think about it for a moment. For me, my inclination was homelessness because I saw the problem in the streets of Montreal where I grew up before moving out west to Calgary. And I was inclined to do something just because that was my inclination, as simple as that. So when I was 5 years old, heading to the bank with my mother, I had 2 quarters with me. And the nice thing about children is they have a sense of purity that sometimes disappears as we grow up. So without thinking, I just gave those quarters to the homeless man. So that inclination was there, and I know that all of you have an inclination that you either have shown or will show very soon. Frustration. This is an important part of the puzzle. I was frustrated because, again, growing up in Montreal, I heard a story one day. It was about a homeless man who died. So why did he die? He froze to death. Why did he freeze to death? He didn't have proper winter clothing, something that all of we probably have in our closets. So that frustrated me because I knew deep down, while there were people that I saw and heard of who were doing good things, lots of people were not doing enough. So that moved me. Don't worry, there was inspiration as well on a more of a positive note. I was inspired by those around me who took action and by people who weren't around me. So I'll give you 2 examples. My parents were very instrumental. They not only talk the talk, but they walk the talk. I'm sure you can think of someone in your life who walks the talk. And they took me along on their excursions as they made very simple differences to their neighbors. So as an example, my father took me along across the city as he collected donated clothing from a variety of retailers. He then provided this clothing to a church. They sold the clothing to families struggling in need, and then they took the profits and went a step further and fed the homeless. And at a very tender age, I understood the simplicity of effective economic models that could make a difference. And in terms of outside of my local networks or outside of my family, I was always reading books and listening to stories of great Canadians doing great things. And I'm sure you can perhaps think of these stories as well. Next slide, please. Or not. Oh yes, I have the clicker. I have to admit, this humor was planned. It seems like it isn't planned, but it was planned all along. Or was it not? So Spread the Love. Here is a fantastic photo of one of our many groups across the country coming together with a very organic process. Mira introduced me. She's actually in this photo. And a lot of our university volunteers as well as sponsors. So let's move on to explaining how Spread the Love works, because I kind of kept this information from you. I've been keeping you along here. So we started in 2002. We didn't have a name. We didn't have structure. We weren't an organization, no staff or volunteer committees. We were simply a group of people who cared about this issue. So we came together. And my vision was to have monthly events where we made these sandwiches and provided them to a soup kitchen. Very quickly, the feedback we received before we asked for the feedback was that people love this. They were having a lot of fun. So you can have fun and make a difference. So I thought, okay, let's get this idea citywide. Let's get other young people replicating the idea. Remember, I was around 15, 16, 17 at this particular point in time. So before I could go out, I had 2 people come to me. So I thought, perfect, it's meant to be. So what I did is I put together some very basic guidelines in terms of fundraising and event management, and I gave it to these 2 different people. One person used this advice as a source of inspiration. Their event, sadly to say, flopped. The other person did take the guidance to heart, but they used their own twist, and they had a very successful event. So I quickly realized that even if you have a very simple idea, such as making sandwiches, you do need to coach and mentor and give some support to people if you want them to join you to make their life even easier. So I set to work, I put together a leadership manual, and I started knocking on the doors of schools, speaking to teachers and young people, saying, hey, this is really easy, come on board, we have some guidelines for you, and a fantastic brand that's undeniable. However, I knew this approach would be slow and essentially not effective. So we ramped things up, we got a lot of media exposure and looked for partnerships. And one day the phone rang. It was an organization calling, and the program director said, hey, we're set up in 30 schools, we love your idea, we'll introduce the program to the schools and you guys can do all the work. Thank you, no worries, we'll do that for sure. So very quickly, by the time I was leaving high school and entering university, we were citywide. And by this point, you probably have a question, so I'll answer it for you. You may be asking, what kept me going? It was actually meeting the people we were feeding. Sometimes it's easy to forget about where the help is going. And I remember in the first initial deliveries, coming up to the soup kitchens and seeing the lineups of these people needing to eat, and hearing their thank yous and making the eye contact and having that human touch, that emotional touch, which is sometimes easy to ignore or forget or simply not run into. That's what kept me going. That's what kept our initial core group of volunteers going. So fast forward, imagine, second year university, kind of bogged down with studies and some other activities. My vision started growing. I wanted to go beyond Calgary because I saw the potential of this, and quite frankly, the need. I knew that I needed to do this and wanted to do it. Needed because I realized in Calgary, 3,000 to 4,000 people were homeless, and after some research, learned that over 1 million Canadian households across the country suffered from food insecurity, that is lack of access to food. And wanted to because, like I said, there was that selfish aspect which you don't want to ignore. You need to do something that speaks to you, otherwise you won't throw your full self into it. And because your approach won't be genuine, and it will be hard to recruit other people. So we were looking for, like I said, a venue to expand our city approach to a provincial approach. And to give you another very short story, when you set a vision and you're dedicated towards that vision and you start taking steps, opportunities either avail themselves to you or you realize what's in front of you. And at that time, we had a very unique opportunity to enter a contest with Alberta credit unions. They were looking to support a cause that they would, like I say, support across the province to make a difference. So to make a long story short, we can talk about this later, perhaps, after our TEDx talks. We won this unique contest, and we partnered with Alberta credit unions. And we expanded province-wide. Okay, what's next, you say? How do we go national? This was a question I asked myself. It was very daunting. Regardless of the project, how do you take something outside of your home province? By this time, Alberta, I labeled as my home province, and I do now. What we did is we used a very, very simple approach. We simply used the relationships we had built across Alberta and Calgary to take it to the next step. A lot of high school students who ran our program in their respective schools were now leaving to other post-secondary institutions. So we asked them to take the program with them. It's as simple as that. I wish I had a more of a complex answer. Actually, I don't. So I would like to, well, that's my journey. I was a little excited, which is a good sign. I passed that slide. I'd like to now talk about 3 takeaway themes. I could give you 10, I could give you 20, but I want to give you 3 so they're easy to remember. The first is I want to talk about our decentralized model of leadership. With Spread the Love, much like TEDx, we gave very basic guidelines, and we gave a very powerful brand that people could rally behind. We handed over the reins to the young people leading their respective Spread the Love groups. And we checked in, we coached them, we supported them, we gave some guidelines in terms of fundraising and event management. But we let them take it as far as they could, and that's why we grew so fast with a very organic nature across the country. The vision and purpose evolved. It's okay to take your initial idea to shut up and do something and let it evolve. At the beginning, I had a very niche focus. I wanted to combat homelessness because that was the face of hunger that I saw on the streets. But behind that face of hunger are multiple other faces of hunger and food insecurity. It affects all and any Canadians, whoever happens to fall into the trap. So I expanded my vision from homelessness to hunger and food insecurity and essentially poverty. And that helped us grow even more. And last but not least, I learned the power of on-the-go learning. When you try to shut up and do something, you think you need to get the perfect plans and strategies and roadmaps and outlines all set together. Sure, trust me, you need to do some basic research and have an idea of what you're doing. But all the good stuff comes later. All the challenges pop up, the opportunities, the difficulties, and you learn as you go. You model other people who have done the same thing. You model other organizations, and you surround yourself with mentors and supporters. So what kept me going? I already mentioned this aspect, and now I would like to leave you with a very specific story that I think about all the time, consistently. I decided one particular day to actually go down and serve the meals that we were delivering to the soup kitchen. Up to that point, we're dropping them off. So I wanted to see who was getting this food. And there was a group of us as volunteers. We were talking after we were done our volunteer shift. And to be honest, I thought we were just a group of volunteers. But here comes the interesting point. Near the end of our conversations, one person said, "Well, I'm homeless." One of the volunteers said, "Well, I am homeless. And even my own granddaughter doesn't know." That took me by surprise. I essentially automatically judged her. I judged her to be not homeless. So that taught me a very powerful lesson. 2, actually. 1 is you can never judge the face of poverty. You can't figure out who is impacted by it and who isn't. And secondly, if this person who is homeless is taking her time and energy to get up and do something, I have no excuse, and you have no excuse. We have no excuse. So you can shut up, you can do it, and you can ultimately spread the love. Thank you.